Excellent. So, welcome. This evening, this is the fourth webinar in our series of four. So we've been going now 4 weeks in a row. Those of you who have been with me throughout, welcome back. Those who are visiting for the first time, there were 3 other webinars in previous weeks. If you missed them, check out the Cornelissen Verlag YouTube channel. The recordings of all 4 webinars will be there shortly. This evening, we're talking about how to keep your learners learning during course-free periods. So we kind of thought of that topic because it's now coming towards the end of July. And if you have been going through courses for the past couple of months, chances are they might be coming to an end now until they restart again in September. But as teachers and trainers, we face these same challenges, around Easter time, around Christmas time, things like that as well, or maybe certain other times of the year where there's a break in courses. So what I'm going to do with you this evening is just talk you through, as you can see here, kind of 6 core ideas or ways in which you can help your learners keep learning during those course-free times to keep them fresh, keep them growing, developing, and reducing the risk of them getting a little bit rusty or kind of stepping back a little bit, forgetting a bit of what they have been learning with you. So, in terms of where we're going, let me just check. Yeah, so we're going to go through 6 kind of core areas. I don't need to read through them now because I know you can read and see those there, but I'll explain a little bit what I mean about those as we go through each one. Christine mentioned that I have been involved in course book writing and authoring with Cornelissen as well. Here are an overview of the books that I've been involved with. I will take a couple of examples from some of these books. If you look at the slides that they're on, you'll see a reference to which particular book it's from or which page it's from. But there'll be loads of ideas for you here this evening, whether you work with these books or not. And even if you work with the books, the examples that I'm going to give, or even if you don't, the examples I'm going to give that are from the books will be relevant and usable for you even if you don't work with the books. They're just ideas you can replicate yourself in your own teaching context. So what I'm going to be focusing on with you is ideas and activities that are relevant, practical, and really easy to implement. So thinking about reviewing and revising your current course. So let's say you've been working with your learners so far, through a course with one of these books like the one I just showed you there. And maybe they finished the book or maybe they're part way through the book. They now have an opportunity. They now have a period of time where the pace slows down a little bit. The heat is off, so to speak. So they're not in regular weekly or even daily lessons, but they've got a little bit of a break to take stock of what it is they've been learning on the course so far. So I think a first thing that you can do with them in one of the last lessons before the course comes to an end or before you take a break between courses is to actually just spend a bit of time with them looking at the contents of the book that you're working with, whichever book you're working with, and identifying some of the key areas maybe that they might benefit from reviewing or kind of doing again or diving deeper into. So whether that's something around, project work or making arrangements with people, or whether it's thinking about their work in teams, or maybe they need to prepare for first contact with some new customers, or maybe they want to review some of the grammar that you've learned on the course, things like that. And so it can be a useful kind of a closing activity to do with your learners is to go back and review what are the things I'd like to dive a little bit more deeply into when I'm taking, a break from this course or in between one course and the next. So that I think is a kind of a key starting point. Another one is most courses out there have a lot of supplementary material available for teachers and for learners, which the learners can draw on during the course-free periods. And in many cases, there's a lot of content out there. Teachers don't have time to go through it. when they are actually delivering the course itself. And so a course free period is a perfect time to do some autonomous learning. So an example of that is the Cornelissen Page Player app. So this app's available in the App Store. And if you or your learners are working with a Cornelissen book that has its content on the Page Player app, there are very, very many of them. You download the app and then you scroll through the contents lists of the books available within the app. So it means that the learners have full access to all of the audio recordings from everything in the book. They've got access to videos that are used within the book, so they can watch them all on their own devices. And they've also got access to loads of additional activities. So what I mean by that, I'm going to just jump down a couple of levels with you into this. So here's an example of when you click into Unit 4 here, it opens up this whole window where you get optional tests with answers, you get all the listening activities that came in the units of the book, but also you get all this additional material as well. So for example, there's a section called additional material looking at work skills. So when they click into that, they then get to 7 pages of additional activities to basically help review the learning that they've done throughout the course. Here's an example of choosing the best response based on what someone has said. Here's an example of highlighting either in green or in blue a particular phrase that is either neutral or strong opinion. So just as an interactivity example, you've got highlighting, you've got choosing the correct option, you've got dragging and dropping words to rearrange sentences and things. You've got summarizing, so choose the best summary of this short little text. You've got gap fill activities. So there's loads of different things in there that you can do. So I suppose the message here is whether you're working with any of the books I've been involved in writing or not, chances are whatever book you're working with, if you are working with one, will have additional supplementary materials for learners to do autonomous learning, whether that's in an app or whether it's in a workbook. And if they don't have the workbook or they don't have the app, then they might actually still have the course book. So there's a load of different ways that you can review or revise your current course while on a course-free period. So moving on, learn more English. So there are tons and tons and tons of resources online aimed at learners of English. So I'm distinguishing here between content that is in English, like the news or something, and content that is aimed at learners of English. So I'm going to show you 2 quick examples. I can't screenshot them in here, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to bring you out to these other websites. So this is the point where I say I'm now taking us off to some external content, which is not Cornelissen content, so we kind of can't be responsible for the content of any third-party sites, but I'm going to show you them anyway to just give you some ideas. Okay, so let me see if I can get this right then. If you bear with me. Ooh, what has just happened there? Bear with me just a second. My window has moved without me realizing. Come back in just a sec. Okay, perfect.
Okay,
so
everything now.
So you should now be able to see the BBC's Learning English page. I will provide you the link on my slides once we go back to the main presentation of the slides, but I just wanted to show you this is a site which is designed for learners of English to improve and learn their English using all sorts of free resources. So the starting page, you can see there are different things like 6-minute English lessons around fighting poverty, There's a feature here on fake news and what it really means. There's a feature on coronavirus stories. So here's some tips on working from home and things like that. So there's a lot of content on the main front page. But also I want to show you these menu bars up here. Depending on the types of learners that you teach. If you teach children, for example, let me see. There's a section in here that has a lot of different stories for kids. I'll click through it just to give you a look. So there's a load of different, here's an example, and then there's loads more. You can kind of click down. There's lots of different stories there for kids. There's quizzes as well. If you are into looking for current affairs within the news section, there's there's reviews of the news. Here's one that was written recently when Kanye West said he was going to run for US president. So they've made an activity and a news story out of that. In the vocabulary section, they've got loads of these little 6-minute lessons. If learners want to review their grammar, you can do that in there. There's also loads of tips for teachers on teaching different types of content. So you can have a look down there by teaching word stress or error correction. So this is maybe less relevant for your learners in learning free times, but it might be interesting for you in between courses to brush up on some teaching skills as well. So that is one example of a site I wanted to show you, which is the BBC's Learning English page. Another one is the British Council's Learning English page. Again, I'll give you the links to these in a moment. This site also is full of a load of free resources for your learners who might want to learn English. You can see specifically here they've got some COVID-19 support. Let me see, I'm clicking on that. Here we go. So you got some COVID-19 support. Use the free resources. So they have got loads of free resources in here. Skills sections, improving your grammar. They've got a business magazine section. They've also got a video zone, which links to some YouTube videos around a range of different topics. So they do have a lot of free stuff in here. They also have some paid stuff. So you will see a lot of ads throughout with them trying to promote their $5.99 subscription course. But there's lots of free stuff in here as well. So you've got the COVID-19 resource area for learners. In the magazine area here, for example, there's a International Day of Friendship. So this is just an example of one of the activity types that are there. There are loads of activity types in this site where basically you've got a preparation task. You click on the X and there's an activity here to get you prepared for reading the article which comes below. Then there is an article below, and then they also have some post-reading tasks here and here. So they're just two examples that I wanted to show you. You can play around with the menu bar up above to get a better idea of the elements within here that will be most relevant for you and your learners, depending on what would benefit them most in their in-between courses period. But there are the links to those two sites that I've just shown you there. Again, there are tons and tons of sites out there, but I just wanted to distinguish for a moment between sites that happen to be in English and sites that are specifically aimed at learners of English to help them learn more English. So that's kind of one approach that you can take with your learners. The next one is learning through English. So this is not so much about going to places that are designed for learners of English, but this is maybe going to sources or places that happen to be in English, and learners can learn about something else through the medium of the English language. And here, a key is to maybe identify something that inspires them, something that will interest them, something that will motivate them. I picked this story here or this picture here rather, because it reminded me of a story of a student of mine in Bayreuth, in Oberfranken, um, many years ago, and I was kind of trying to think about how to motivate and engage him to learn autonomously in between course periods, and it was difficult because he didn't want to learn grammar or vocabulary or review business English or any of that sort of thing. But I found out that one of his hobbies was astronomy. So together we went and we found an astronomy magazine, which I think he ended up subscribing to from the United States. But the point is that it was in English, and it was about a subject and a topic that he had a great personal interest in, and so it made it more motivational and more interesting for him to learn about this during his course free periods. You know, he didn't want to necessarily feel like he was learning. He wanted to fulfill his hobby. You know, so whether a personal interest might be in astronomy or maybe in something to do with, the natural world, whether it is documentaries or things like that, learning about, well, documentaries basically. There's lots of them on TV all the time, and in other sources, other places, websites where people might want to just delve into whatever their hobby might be a little bit further. Um, One that I know a lot of people are getting involved in these days is the financial stock markets and things like that, because they are all over the place. So I know lots of people have been reading and learning about that type of thing. Um, if it's in English, it's going to help support the development of their language ability while simultaneously um, fulfilling a personal interest, a hobby, a need. So this is kind of learning about something through English, and that's going to have a positive knock-on effect on their English. Um, Moving on, another example, which I kind of touched on a little bit in the previous slide, is thinking about just recreation, free time. And so encouraging your learners to, to pick up a book, basically, um, and read a book in English about a subject or a genre that they might be personally interested in. Maybe it's a particular author or a story, a series of characters or something. Maybe it's something that was originally in German that has now been translated to English, or vice versa. Or watching TV. There are very many streaming services available these days, and learners can watch one of those and watch a show that might interest them, or a movie that might interest them in English. If they are doing that, my tip in terms of subtitles, if they do need them, is to put the subtitles on in English as well. Because if they have the subtitles in German, then they're going to spend the whole time reading. But if they've got the subtitles in English, they'll be doing a mix of reading and watching, plus they'll also get to see the written English of the words that they're seeing. So it'll help reinforce that learning effect as well, while letting them watch the TV at the same time. Me personally, I'm watching a really great show on an online streaming service at the moment in German, which is great, with German subtitles as well. So that's kind of the idea of getting them thinking about using their recreation time to help develop their English at the same time. So taking them out of a formal learning environment, because they're not in a classroom or a virtual classroom, and just helping them focus on ways to help keep in touch with the language while not necessarily feeling like they're in a formal learning environment. I see someone's mentioned National Geographic or podcasts as well. So yeah, National Geographic is great. Anything that can get people interested and reading or learning or watching TV. National Geographic exists as a magazine and a TV channel. Probably on the website, there's all sorts of resources and interviews and videos as well, which will be useful. Netflix, of course. There's loads of them. Different online services that have a range of different things available. Podcasts, there are loads and loads of podcasts out there. I had a learner once, and she was into a very specific type of dog breed. I can't remember the name of the breed, but it was quite particular and quite specific. And we managed to find a podcast in English by someone who was also very interested in this particular breed of dog and did a podcast about how to care for your dog and how to feed them well and the best things for their fur and all sorts of stuff like that. So the key is try and identify a personal interest in something, and then it's not such a big step to do that in English rather than doing it in or through German. So moving on, number 5 is project work. So by project work, I'm kind of building on the previous ideas of learning more English, learning through English, or doing stuff for fun and recreation. In project work, maybe learn to build, create, or design something. Or learn about a subject and learn how to do it, how to do something. So I'm going to take you off site again for a moment. So again, we're going to a third-party website, so it's not Corneliusson endorsed, supported, or liable for, but it is something really cool that I want to show you that you might be interested in. So give me just a second. And I need to tee this up in the background. Actually, I'm going to ask you a question first. Who knows what Imagineering is? Tell me in the chat field if you've heard this word before. I'm going to write it in for you there. Imagineering. What's Imagineering? Structured imagination. Engineering your own ideas. Creative thinking, maybe something to do with think tanks. Yeah, someone else got it a moment ago when they said, see Disney. So let me jump over here. So Imagineering is, it's what Disney does when they basically use engineering and mathematics and design and creativity and animation and architecture and building and all of those things to basically do what they do. And in many cases, it's centered around the experience that you get when you go into a Disney theme park. And there is there's an online kind of course provider called Khan Academy. And they have liaised or collaborated with Disney to come up with 2 really cool free online courses. The first one is called Imagineering in a Box, which I'm going to give you a little look into now in a moment. The other one is called Storytelling, about Pixar in a Box. And so this one is about, well, developing storytelling skills, which is something that we all need in life and in business. Actually, I'll click into this first and just give you a quick look at it. There we go. Oops. I think I might have clicked too much. So basically, it's an online course which is video-based and activity-based and helps people learn through telling stories and structuring stories and thinking about characters in visual language and film grammar and then pitching ideas and things like that. What I wanted to show you about is Imagineering in a Box, which is the Disney one. Which explores different aspects of theme park design, from characters to ride development and everything else. And this is when I say it's a short course, it's divided into kind of 3 core areas or lessons, with 35 instructional videos. And the curriculum features project-based exercises that apply science, technology, engineering, and math that allow learners to create themed experiences. So I'm going to click back into this here to give you a look at what I mean. So basically, there's 3 key lessons in this. And the reason I'm telling you this as well is that your learners might find this interesting to do maybe as a project over the summer break, especially if they also have kids at home. Because, you know, I've got kids at home and we've done this with them as well. And it's in English, it's through English, but it's learning about the creative process that goes into designing and creating an experiential experience for visitors to a theme park. It looks at everything from creating the story that goes behind the land to the layout and the building design. You know, there's loads of videos, there's interviews in there with people like whose job it is to make rocks, you know, and they say, well, when you make a rock for the movies, it just has to look like a rock. It doesn't have to feel like one as well. But when you make a rock in a theme park, it's got to feel like a rock as well as look like a rock. So there's all sorts of really interesting things in there around engineering, design, maths, animation, computers and IT. There's kind of something for everyone in there. Um, so that was what I wanted to show you on this particular course. Oh, it's free. I mean, I assume I said it's free already. It takes about 6 hours to run through, but you can stretch it out even longer and make a whole project out of it. So let me jump back to where we were and just minimize. Brings us back to here. There's the link there to that particular course. But again, so the idea here is maybe get your learners to come up with a project that they can do over the 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 weeks in between a course period. And it might not have anything to do with English learning per se. It might just be about something else, how to design, create, or build something. It could be learn how to paint, for example, and then paint something. Or it could be learn how to build or design something. And if it's a collaborative project that they can do with their friends or even with their families, with their kids, then they might get more engaged with it. It might be more likely to happen. You know, and in many cases on projects, we do collaborate and work with others. So that would be kind of my idea or my tip there. And from personal experience, that's an awesome course. So I'd say check it out. So moving on now, thinking about step.
Mike, there was a question in the chat
Oh, I'm
room
sorry.
for which level the activity might be suitable, the project work.
Let me see. I mean, I always go by the mantra, don't necessarily grade the content, grade the activity. So learning how to build, design, or create something could be done by anyone at any level, I would say. It's a matter of trying to identify something that will be something that would fit the level of the learner, you know. Another thing that we always bore in mind when we were writing Business English for Beginners is that people who are at beginner level of a language probably or most likely have a lot of life experience. They're not beginners at life. They're not beginners at business or at work. So they will have a lot of clever ideas and a lot of experience they can bring to something, even if they are at a low level of language. Thinking about that particular project that I just showed you, it's all video based, so learners can stop and start it and stop and start it as they're going through. So I would say even someone at a kind of an A2-ish level would still get a lot of value from it. It's you know, my kids are like 4 and 6, and they got a lot out of it, even though they know nothing about design or engineering or IT. And the language in there wasn't too adult or complex for them to be able to get it and understand what they need to do. Cool. So moving on, thinking about content creation. Now, this is a great time for you to, you know, outsource some of your course design for your next course to your learners if you're keeping them with you from one course to the next. It's also a great way for them to recycle some of the learning that you've been doing with them and some of the content that you've been doing with them, and a really good way for them to source authentic, real world knowledge from the people in their circle of friends, their community, their spheres. So I'm going to give you a few examples of what I mean by that in very concrete terms, and of tasks you can set your learners. Because I've done exactly that in some of the books that I showed you before. So this, for example, is Gyeonggi Varga, who is a friend and former colleague. She's a trainer based in Nuremberg who does intercultural skills training for Germans and Hungarians working together. And so for one of the books, the B2 book, I interviewed her to get some of her knowledge and her tips and ideas around what's important when learning to communicate more successfully with people from other countries, how we can develop better and greater understanding of working with people from other countries, getting beyond the theory to actually practical ideas, give us an example of what you're talking about. And so there was a scenario, a situation that she described where, I mean, I can have a quick look at it with you or read it for you just here. A project manager went to one of his team members on a Friday to get a deliverable, which he had to submit the following Monday. He presumed that she would be finished by the Friday, as he had originally requested, and didn't think to check in with her regularly before the deadline. He expected her to work independently. However, as he hadn't checked in with her regularly, she underestimated the importance of the deadline and hadn't got the work finished. There was a breakdown in communication, as he was depending on her to deliver, but she hadn't realized the importance of the deadline because of his perceived lack of interest in how the work was going. So this is a particular scenario here. She says the example was specific to a German-Hungarian working relationship, and the discovery effect, the learning for them both in that, was around attitudes to time management and independent or supervised working practices. They both assumed their norms would be the same as the other person's and would be understood in the same way. And this is what led to the breakdown in communication and ultimately the missed deadline. So, simply said, it could have been avoided through people finding out how the attitudes are in the countries where they do business and how they may differ from their own. So this is an example of an interview that I did with Gyeonggi. It was actually over the telephone. I recorded it and then I just transcribed it out. And then I built activities around that interview, both before and afterwards, and discussion, and then a little mini role play and things like that. And so your learners all know people in their lives, in their circle of community, who know things that you don't and that they don't. So you can get your learners to tap into that knowledge by interviewing their friends, their family, their colleagues, and then capturing that knowledge in some way that they can disseminate it when you all come back to course or come back to the next course in the form of activities, whether it is through written activities or maybe not a whole article, but some kind of a fact sheet, a topic sheet. Here's another one. I mentioned this one before. I was looking at meeting skills for a different unit in the book, and so I tapped into my friends. Ron here, for example, he works in project management, so they have meetings all the time. So I says, here, Ron, give me some tips about meetings that are actually real world relevant and applicable. And he said, well, look, if a key one here is if the meeting's going to involve some conflict, see if you can get some one-to-one time with the main stakeholders in advance of the meeting, so you can find out what each of their points of view are, where they're likely to concede ground. And so if the conflict then arises, you already know both sides' positions before you've gone into the meeting, so you can better steer to a compromise when that happens, which I thought was a really logical and cool tip, but not something you might typically see in a course book environment. Or another one is look out for people who are being quiet. They may be less confident at speaking, so ask their opinion, but it may also be a sign that they're disengaged, in which case it's worth finding out why. Nobody should leave a meeting feeling that they couldn't get their point across. So that's a clear tip just around meeting management, which again can be very useful to think of for your learners. And so a real world task could be not necessarily to survey some colleagues in their teams, but if it's between training courses, they could survey some friends or some family members who they themselves take part in whatever the business thing is that you're addressing. In this case, it's meetings. It could be something else. And ask them for their top 3 tips, and see what they can then bring back into the course the next time they come back in. So the idea here is to just tap into your network for their knowledge, try and capture that knowledge in some way as a learner, that the learner can then disseminate that knowledge to the rest of the class when you all regroup again. And if you give that to them as a content creation task, the actual task of creating the content is also going to be what will help them deepen and revise their English language knowledge and ability. And they might then have to go back to the course or to the book and review and revise vocabulary or things like that. Another example, so I've looked at capturing that knowledge in a written way. Another way that you can do it is to capture it in a video way. So, most people have phones that can capture video. They could equally video their friends or family or, people on their sports team or whatever about whatever it is that person has knowledge about that could be interesting for the rest of them. And so in this case, for the B1 book that I showed you earlier on, the blue one, where are we? That one there, Basis for Business B1. I interviewed David. David Briggs is a computer game designer from Berlin. And this particular video is also freely available for you on YouTube. So even if you don't have the book or you don't work with the course, you still might find the video useful and interesting to use with your learners. So what I want to do with you now is let's have a quick look at it. The video is about pitching a proposal and pitching your ideas. It does come with some activities before and after. We can have a little look at those in a moment. But let's have a quick look at the video first. Now I will caveat this. Yes, you can also find the video in the Page Player app as well, which was the app that I showed you earlier on. And so your learners can basically watch it on the go wherever they are. So in the event that you have difficulty hearing this video, it might be a sound issue at your end, but don't worry, this whole webinar is being recorded, so you'll also be able to watch this and everything else later when the recording goes online as well. But let's just take a moment and have a look at this. While you're watching it, think to yourself, how could I use this with my learners, either in class or in between courses, in between learning times?
Unit 11. Business Life. Pitching a proposal.
What is a pitch and why is it important for business? A pitch is really just an idea that you've had that you explain in a very short and concise manner, and you get all of your ideas out basically in as effective and efficient of a manner as possible. In game design, we use pitches to convey ideas like new characters for a game or maybe new rules inside of a game. And what we found is the best way to give a pitch is just in a very, very short, memorable, but concise way. We call these elevator pitches. So an example of a good elevator pitch might be for the movie Star Wars. If you want to describe the movie Star Wars quickly, you could just say it's just the story of King Arthur set in space. The best way to prepare for a pitch is just to practice. Find a colleague or a friend, give the pitch to them, tell them your ideas, have them repeat it back to you, and if you understand everything that they're saying, all of your key ideas are there, and it's all in line with what you were originally thinking, you've created a great pitch. Once you've given your pitch, the idea is out there, and it's almost always going to start a conversation. The other person might have ideas of their own, or they might even want to completely change your project. So it's going to be up to you to pick out what are the core ideas, what's most important, and then protect your overall vision.
Okay. Yeah, I think someone had a difficulty hearing the sound. Unfortunately, that was at your end and not at our end. But as I said before, you can watch the recording of the webinar once it goes online. If you want to watch the recording of that video in the meantime, you can check it out in the Cornelissen Page Player app, or also on the Cornelissen YouTube channel. But this I think is an interesting example for what to think about in a pitch, and thinking of people's kind of knowledge levels of their skill area, because in many cases, thinking about pitching, you'd think about influencing others and structuring your idea and being short and concise. But he made a point at the end there, which was really interesting, that I hadn't heard before, is be prepared to have other people try and hijack your idea or use it to build their own ideas into. And so in that case, I think it's very important to prepare in that level. And I suppose the reason I showed you this is to just think about the external knowledge that friends, peers, family, people who work in other sectors are likely to have, that they can help bring into the course, that others can then learn from. So where we went from there with that is then we built a whole series of activities that came out after it to help the learners think about designing and delivering their own pitches. So looking here, I'm going to just zoom those up for you so you can see them a little bit better. I'll give you a second to have a look at that. I'm aware the sun is creeping up my face, so I'm just going to stick myself on pause and close the blinds for a second. You can have a quick look at that slide. Okay, so that is a bit better. But where I was going with this is whatever the topic is if it's a work or business related topic. Let's see if I can move there. I'm still getting it, but I guess you can see me okay. If it's a business related topic that you're trying to get insights into, you can then create some kind of a simulation or some kind of an activity that your learners can do after it. It's really easy to just create a simulation based around 3 simple questions. What's the situation, who's involved, and which vocabulary or phrases will you need? And then after you've done such a simulation, debriefing the activity is really essential in terms of getting learners thinking about what went well, what they might do differently next time, how they might adapt their approach as they're going through an activity. And so I'm already thinking about what happens when you come back to class, back to the course, after your course-free period. So the whole idea here is getting your learners, I'm going to go back a little bit to where we had it, content creation. So that's the kind of key, is thinking about how can I get my learners to create some content, either from their own knowledge set or drawing on their community of friends, colleagues, peers, to interview them either in writing or in video of some kind, and then design and create some kind of a learning resource around that so that they come back into the course with the opportunity to share knowledge to those who are in the course, to the other people in the course. So that's the kind of the core idea here behind the content creation idea. And it is really easy to do. I've given you 4 or 5 examples there, different ways to get it done. So that kind of brings us to the end of today's webinar. Just to review the 6 areas that we looked at. The first one is review or revise your current course. So what that is kind of before your course comes to an end, go back through the course, go back through the contents lists, look at the different topics that your learners covered, let them identify the areas in which they'd like to dive a little bit deeper in your course-free period, and then maybe set some activities for them or give them some additional resources, or there might be a student's workbook, or there might be an app that has additional content. So point them in that direction so that they can learn autonomously during the break. Building on the autonomous learning, learn more English, not only from your course, but from other external sources There are loads online which are designed for the learning of English. I showed you 2 examples earlier. Learn through English is to think about a subject or a topic that might be of interest to them. I picked out the financial markets or astronomy. And so that's a mix between a hobby and maybe something that's less hobby but just personal interest. The recreation is maybe a step aside from hobbies and personal interests to what you might call just for fun. So your video streaming services or just reading books, reading novels, things like that might not be related to a specific hobby of any kind. The project work is learn how to build something, create something, design something. It could be something theoretical, like the courses that I showed you online, or it could be something physical. Like I know someone who was learning how to build a greenhouse in his back garden over the summer, and doing that through the medium of the English language. So kind of looking at DIY tips. For people who like DIY and working at home, there are tons and tons of people who have YouTube video channels teaching different elements of DIY through the medium of the English language. So that's a way to do a project and practice English at the same time. And the last idea was around content creation. So getting them actively thinking about, well, what am I going to do when I come back into my class after this course-free period? What can I create in the meantime that's going to be of value to others? And how can I tap into my own knowledge or the knowledge of my peers, my colleagues, my family, my friends to bring something back of value to the rest of the class? So that is pretty much the recap of what we've been looking at. As I mentioned before, this was a 4-webinar series. This was the last one in the series. The other 3 that we've looked at so far over the past 3 weeks was about preparing and delivering online lessons, motivating and engaging learners, specifically in an online learning environment as well, measuring progress also in an online learning environment, and keeping your learners learning between courses. And again, many of the ideas today were also focused on online or digital, blended with autonomous learning as well, because I realize that many of you might be in a learning or teaching online context these days. So I hope you enjoyed them. I've kind of come to the end now. I've enjoyed the last few weeks with you guys. And as Christina has mentioned, these webinars are all being kind of, I suppose, cut and edited, and they're going to be on the Cornelissen YouTube channel soon. Soon means in a matter of weeks, I think. And if you'd like to see more of me, Cornelissen are planning a digital learning day in October. So it's a whole day of online events and webinars and things like that, rather than just a once-off. And I will also be delivering another webinar on that day. More information will follow on that. I would say check out the Cornelissen Veranstaltungs page on the website. And if anyone has any questions or comments for me or want to follow up on anything, you can connect with me through my About Me page. I'm also on LinkedIn and on Twitter and things like that. So please do reach out to me. And I think that brings me to the end. If you have any questions or comments or anything is left open, please let us know. Throw it into the chat field. And simultaneously, I'll pass you over to Christina.
Thank you very much.
Who's going to stop the recording and run through the feedback and other things with you.
And today's talk. And thank you all out there for joining us and being with us for 4 parts of our series. I'm going to stop the recording now, but please stay with us because I'll change to the layout where you can give your feedback. And if you have any questions, we're going to go through them in a couple of seconds. Just a moment.